and the job was meant to be bid. The solicitation had said that we're going to only remove like say 2 doors at a time, and we pull a door out, then put a door in, and make it secure so that it's not something that we could pull out and measure correctly and then make the door and then put back in like say you would on a traditional project.
Okay.
And so we're running into a problem that our door manufacturer has made most of these doors too tight, and they're saying it's because they couldn't measure after the, like, typically you would pull a door out, then measure and make it, and then install once it arrives. So we're trying to figure out how to address this with the VA under an existing condition issue for a change order. So
hold on. I'm just trying to process everything that I'm hearing here. So what I'm gathering is that the federal government did not provide rough openings for the doors, and they're all different?
yes, they had dimensions that were in a door schedule on their print, but those measurements weren't right. We didn't make the doors off of those. We were told that we had to do a field verification, and so we did a field verification like you would do. We didn't want to own the measurement, so we had the manufacturer come measure it. And the print does have the door locations, like, door 139-2 and 136-3. And I think there was there wasn't exact measurements. They were just like,
Okay.
it's a 3-foot door.
Yeah, you would go field measure, get your measurement for their frame, and then they would make, they made their frames off of what the smallest measurement they got for that rough opening.
That's okay. Guys, I need to ask a lot of questions here to help guide you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and forgive me because some of the answers you give me, I'm going to ask more questions based on what you said because it matters. Okay. So the first question I have based on what you said is that they told us we had to field verify. I need to know if that's something that was written in the specification on the door schedule. Who is they told us? What does that mean?
That's the VA.
I will give you an answer. We're going to get that. We need to get that answer in writing on what that
Whoa,
was.
whoa, 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 whoa. First of all, I don't want to communicate with anybody.
No, I mean, not saying in writing. I'm saying we need to go back through the documents and see where it directed.
Okay, so if you're taking notes, the first question is, Matt said they told us. I need to know what you meant by that. If it was a person, if it was something that somebody read, if it was, would you say the other guy's name is Justin?
Yes.
Okay, are you getting your information from Justin?
I'm getting, Justin works for me on this side.
Well, I understand that, but I need to know what you meant by that, okay? But I don't want to ask anybody in the government any questions, okay? Because you have this federal contract and you have a reasonable right, you have a right to a reasonable interpretation of the contract documents as a whole, okay? And in order to properly guide you through this, I need to understand A, what our interpretation is, and B, what is that interpretation based on? Okay? And if it was somebody actually saying, hey, you have to field verify, well, fuck no. I had a reasonable right to interpret the contract documents. The contract documents said that the rough opening is X. Now, What I can't control and what I don't know yet is in a conversation with the door manufacturer, they said, hey, rough openings on schedules are never right, so we just go out there and we take measurements ourselves. Well, okay, then fucking that's your responsibility, not my responsibility. Okay? So then that kind of defaults into the 5 steps to solve any problem. Step 1, define the problem. Step 2, suggest a solution. Step 3, assign responsibility. Step 4, a time frame. And step 5, a consequence if that person doesn't get it done in that time frame. Okay? So, but I don't know who to lay the blame on. You, the government, or the door manufacturer. I don't have enough information yet.
Okay. What? Okay, so I need to get you.
I need to know who's responsible. Okay, if it's in the contract that it says that the contractor, hey, these are what we think the rough dimensions are, the rough opening, but you must field verify. Well, okay, so you took on that responsibility. Great. Who did you then turn that responsibility over to? The door manufacturer? Okay, so then the door manufacturer, you had a responsibility to field verify. The fucking doors don't fit, and that's on you. Okay? But don't let them turn around and go, oh no, it's your fault because, you had this responsibility to. I didn't have the responsibility. I turned over all that responsibility to you in exchange for dollars. So you tell me who's responsible. I don't know. Did somebody in your company say, yeah, we're going to pull these things out and we're going to give you the dimensions and then you make it and then we just suck it if we gave you the wrong dimensions? Well, maybe somebody on your team did that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I know that the manufacturer went to both sites with our field staff and did all of their own measurements, and then from what I'm gathering, I believe that they had sent that over to us to say, here's what we have. Do you take a second look at it? Do you have any comment? And then the guy that went to said he'll take a look. He didn't.
Okay, who's our guy? Who specifically?
His name is Scott. He's the one that Justin took the job over from because Scott got too busy.
Okay, but hold on. Who does Scott work for? You?
Me. Yep.
Okay, and what is his qualifications to be answering questions about doors? What's his role in your company?
He's a project manager.
Okay, so look, a project manager might, by title alone, believe that he has the responsibility to interact with and communicate with and make decisions on. Okay, so maybe he wasn't stepping outside of his perceived responsibilities when he answered that question. The only thing I can tell you is that there's only one right answer to that question, and there's about 100 different wrong answers. I'm more interested in the right response, which is fucking A, that ain't my responsibility. I'm not commenting on the door jamb size, the door opening, the rough opening. That's y'all's. That's what we're paying you for.
Yeah, no, we've talked about that. That's totally what he should have said. So the exact response, because she sent me his email, was she had said, "Hey Scott, take a look at the attached sheets. These are from Nick's site survey. I wanted to run them by you. I am rounding the door sizes to the nearest round number. Our opening measurements were taken from the smallest point from block to block. All the door sizes are different from door schedule. Looks like they had a mix of inside and outside dimensions on the schedule. Just wanted you to know there are a few that will be tight and a few that will have some additional room. Want to make sure that this works for you. Take a look and let me know if you agree and want to give me a call to look it over. He responded, that makes total sense to me. I'll give it a look. I'll give it a quick look-see and see if anything jumps out at me. And he never responded back to say, yes, it looks good. That was the last communication that she sent me.
Okay, that's fine. So, look, there's basically two avenues. One is blame the government, and two is blame the door manufacturer guy that's providing. Who's installing the doors?
We are.
Okay, like we internally?
Yeah, our employees are.
Okay. Um, so, number one, I need to know if it, I'm almost 100% certain that it's going to say this because this is the most common thing the federal government does is say, here's the rough dimensions, field verify. And unless they're significantly off, there's just nothing that you can do about it. But it sounds like one of the possibilities is that they were significantly off and that it ended up costing more, but you wouldn't get the cost of the mistakes, you'd get the cost of we had to add 1 inch to the frame size, and so we bought an extra inch of steel, and that cost $5. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. It's a negligible argument, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because
So
there's almost no cost in manufacturing a door frame if it's 1 inch off from the shown dimension.
Agreed. The costs are that we're incurring is, this was supposed to be pull a door out, put a door in, two guys do it in a day. Some of these are taking a couple days each. So we're over the course of 60 some odd doors, it's
what's the root cause of the additional time?
So the door sizes.
Okay, so in other words, you're spending more. So
you're
spending more time because the door frames came in and they're not fitting right. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like they put the door in the opening and they don't have any wiggle room to try to square it up.
Okay,
so
so
they
that's
have to chip away
what that is. That's a back charge to the door manufacturer for the additional time. Now, I don't know how you're going to need to speak to somebody at a high level over there so that he understands, hey, the dimensions were your responsibility. Our responsibility is taking what you give us and just installing it and spending an hour adjusting it and getting it squared up. But now we're spending an additional 8 hours because you got the door frame sizes, and that costs money, even though you might lose this entire contract. In other words, you may get no money for if our costs are that high. And then you negotiate something that makes sense because that's when lawsuits start flying. But ultimately, it's his responsibility to give you the product and dimensions that you needed in order to do that. I would document the ever living hell out of it so that you can show, because that's when things start going to bonding companies and that kind of stuff, and you got to stand your ground and say our expectation was this, and we had every right to reasonably expect that, and this is what we ended up with.
Agreed.
So this is probably a dumb question then. So obviously we're gonna have a conversation with Paula and the people from Kelly Bros there.
That's the door manufacturer.
The door manufacturer. And I know obviously there's gonna be pushback, but do we wanna hold off for, I guess, how long of stop doing install? Or do we keep installing, running into the problems?
Well, that's up to you. That's a business decision. It's not a dumb question, but that's a business decision. And I don't.
Same document.
I mean, look, it's not my money, and so, I can't really make that decision for you or guide you on that, other than I can tell you what my perceived consequences would be both ways if you want that. Okay. So
part of the issue, Sean, though, is not totally on just the door. Like, it is some of those scenarios that I'm saying, but some of it is the demolition required is the the door manufacturer is saying that the slurry behind the old frames is causing part of the problem. And so these frames that were in these openings got grouted in with mortar, where that's not how things are done anymore. If the new doors going in that would void manufacturer warranty because the frames rot out prematurely from the moisture. So we are cutting these doors out, the old ones, and the damage that's happening from it is excessive to the point of there was no way for us to know what was behind those frames.
Okay, thank you for telling me that. Now I have more questions. Okay. There was nothing on the contract documents to indicate that there was mortar behind the door frames.
I have to verify that, but I do not believe there was.
Not that I've seen.
Okay.
Because all they kept telling us was like, well, doors before this, everyone was sloshing them in, and it's like, well, if you look at this the steel frame like guidebook or whatever for metal frames and everything, it tells you to not let mortar get to a certain like wetness to put behind it, because then it takes away the warranty for the frame, because it's watered down, it deteriorates the frame.
Okay.
And then you
hold on. What were you reading that told you that? How do you know that?
Talking with Paula, because she sent me over there.
That's a door manufacturer.
Okay, yeah, I understand. I understand who Paula is. Okay, now what prompted Paula saying this? What was the question?
We were running into a problem where they want us to slosh the back of the frames, and we
hold on. Look, we got. I got to take you one step at a time. I'm sorry that keep cutting you off.
That's fine.
You guys went out there, started pulling the first frame off, and realizing, hey, there's mortar behind these door frames. Okay.
Some of them, correct.
Some of them.
Yep.
Then you went to Paula and talked about the mortar in some way, and then Paula came back and told you that can be a problem. Am I saying this right?
Happened, a little bit. So what happened? Eric Mortar, the guy that is running
the COR
for the VA there at the Bath and Canandaigua VAs, he was telling us that we needed to slosh the back sides of these frames because of people coming in and out of them with material and stuff and causing damage. So they wanted mortar behind the frames for a structural thing to help out with, just in case something hit the frame. And what we told Eric, in the contract, it doesn't state that we have to do that. So then what we did after that was we talked with Paula to confirm that sloshing the back sides of these frames is going to void warranty. And then she prompted us to that manufacturer thing for the steel frame and everything. And we found in that there's a spot saying if you slosh the back sides of the frames, where it's pretty much almost like a water base, that it will cause, deterioration, rust, and stuff like that. So then Paula was telling us that if that happens, they are not going to keep the warranty on the frames. So that's what prompted this whole sloshing in the back of the frames.
Okay, thank you for telling me that.
Yep.
The COR is not a contracting officer, and it sounds like you know that he cannot change the contract, because there was apparently some pushback on, hey, it's not in our contract to slosh the back of these frames. So Paula wrote back and said, hey, this could be a problem associated with the warranty. What did you do with that information?
I then took her email, forwarded that to Eric, plus all the stuff that I found in that manufacturer steel frame that she sent over to me. I highlighted a couple things saying that this is going to happen to the frames, hence why she's not going to keep warranty if we do slosh in the back of these frames. So I sent him all of that information.
Okay, and then what happened?
And then there was obviously still pushback. So then we went and had a conversation, Jesse Cottrell and I, who was our general superintendent, and went and had a conversation with Eric and told him, went through the contract, the specs, because it doesn't call any type of sloshing in the specs, and which they agreed on.
And then what?
Yep. And then it kind of became to an agreement that like they wanted to find something to to fill the void, and we told them that we want to help try to figure something out that'll work and that won't obviously mess with the warranty. And that's kind of where we're sitting at now.
Okay, so, stop right there. To
answer your question.
First of all, repeat after me. I am a dumb contractor.
I am a dumb contractor.
I do not come up with solutions for the federal government.
I do not come up with solutions for the government.
Okay. That needs to be something that sticks in your head, okay? Hey, listen. The answer to that is, hey, listen. We build, this is a hard bid contract. We bid to do what's shown in the contract documents. If you want changes, there is a change order process that the contracting officer can go through. Whatever you guys design and how you want to change, we'll offer an estimate. And if you guys decide to move forward with that, then we'll move forward with that. There are methodologies within the contract that the federal government can come out there and stop the work. Hey, stop. We're going to stop doing these frames. We need to come up with a solution for, okay, no problem. We'll stop. We'll have a demobilization cost. We'll have a remobilization cost. And we can come back once you guys figure out what you want to do with the frames. It's their problem, not yours. Are we clear?
Yep.
Okay. So now, this seemed like a fork in the road in the conversation, because initially we were talking about things not fitting, and then all of a sudden we're talking about sloshing behind the frames because previous frames had been sloshed, which is fine, but I want to go back to, I still have questions on the previous sloshing of the frames. Now, if our team was not aware that there was mortar behind the frames that we were going into, once we started pulling the frames out so that somebody could measure, I'm imagining, and keep in mind I'm not an expert in door installations, but I'm imagining that the person who came out to measure saw existing mortar on the section that you're going to install the frame. Is that true or not true?
No, it's not true. They couldn't see behind the frames.
No, but so are they guesstimating? In other words, do they have enough knowledge? This is just a general purpose question I just want to understand. A door manufacturer or anybody in the door industry, when they go out to measure for new frames and doors, do they not pull off the frame to measure? They measure just the frame. They have enough information on what the existing material is that they can tell how thick it is, and so that they know what the rough opening is based on the frame itself.
Yeah, when doing the renovations, they have enough information. So with these doors, they went on both sides of the doors. They measured the block that the frame was mounted on. They measured the block from the inside of the door, from the outside of the door, and then they used the lower of the two to make the product small enough because if they went with a higher number, then it would have been too tight to fit. So they were running with the lower of the two measurements from inside to outside.
I understand that part, which leads me to my next question. When you pull the old frames out to install new frames, are there adjustments physically that you can do to the existing structure? In other words, can you knock off the existing masonry stuff or mortar or whatever's back there to create a bigger physical opening?
No, most of these are in brick, and they have a steel lintel going across the top to hold the weight.
Yep.
So they are, due to that, they can't be made bigger without, I mean, you could do anything you want, right? But it would be pretty invasive.
You wouldn't expect to have to do that. Okay, that answers my question. I'm just trying, I always tell people I'm not the construction expert. I'm the federal government construction, like all the the stuff associated with it. So, but I know how to ask good questions to better understand. Okay, so with that said, you explained to me how they arrived at their numbers. What do you think happened that sometimes the frames came in and they were too big?
Well, me in my position, I think that I think the manufacturer should have known from their experience to run with a even smaller size to give us wiggle room. And then two, I think that if my project manager had more experience doing this, they would have challenged the number and said, yeah, make it a half inch smaller or an inch smaller, is what I think could have happened to not be in that same scenario.
Well, then I'm not going to answer for your project manager. I'm just going to say that it wasn't his responsibility. I can understand how he would perceive to get involved in that, but at the end of the day, the only lesson for him is, hey, we exchange dollars for responsibility. Okay? And we have exchanged dollars for the responsibility of the manufacturer of the door frames. And so our expectation is that when they get there, we're only going to have to do X amount of work in order to get them installed. And then you need to have a conversation with the door manufacturer about this additional time because it's their fault, and remanufacture door frames that may have to be remanufactured. I would still push that all on them, and I know that's an uncomfortable conversation, but that's part of life and part of business and all that kind of stuff. So that's the answer to that. I've given you a really good answer for the concept of slurry behind door frames and look, I'll just tell you this. Over the years, I've had a lot of arguments with a lot of people about warranties. And the overwhelming end result answer that has always almost 100% come up is that the federal government wants warranties. We, the people that fund all this shit, we want warranties. Okay? And so it's highly unlikely that a contracting officer would make a decision to void a warranty in exchange for, hey, our guys bump into these shits and then they bend the frames. Okay?
Yeah. Well, with that existing condition scenario, I was saying the area around the doors on some of these doors has had to be rebuilt, and some of that area is block and brick and drywall, and we've had to do a variety of things over the course of, say, 24 doors that we've had to, purchase materials and spend time.
But if the manufacturer had created the correct size, we wouldn't have had to do that. Yes or no?
Not every one of them.
Yeah, because some of them are unforeseen behind it. Like there was one door when we took it out, there was obviously water damage to the stud, so we had to replace all that.
But that's a differing site condition. Whoa.
Correct.
There is no so we had to, okay?
Right.
That's the problem with people in the construction industry. Your mindset is, hey, the customer has a problem, we can fix that. Okay? In federal government construction, when there's a problem like that, that's a differing site condition. In accordance with the federal acquisition regulations, you have 10 days to notify the federal government of a differing site condition. Okay? Hey, this is what we found. There was no way that we could have anticipated seeing this. What do you want to do? let me ask you this question, Justin, just to drive this point home. Suppose the federal government came out there and said, hey, we really liked that damage behind there and we didn't want it fixed. What are you going to fucking do now?
Nothing.
What do you mean nothing? You have to give
No.
it back to them the way that it was. You're the one that went in there and changed it.
And took it out, right? I get what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, great point. Well, so we have had dialogue with the COR and the CO about some of these scenarios, and they directed us because the way the job has to be secured and we have to keep moving forward, they told us that, what's that form called? The REA?
Yeah, an REA.
Yeah, it's called a request for equitable adjustment. Hey, let me tell you a story to really drive this point home, because, man, stories stick with you. I don't know if you've ever heard my spiel on stories, but do you know how long the written language has been around, handwriting?
No.
About 10,000 years. But how long have humans been on this planet? Hundreds of thousands of years. So if written word wasn't around, how do you communicate information over generations?
Pictures.
Stories.
Stories, yeah.
Don't eat the red berry. Your uncle ate the red berry and he died. Fuck, yeah. Once you hear that story, guess what you don't eat?
Red berry.
Okay. That's why stories are so powerful. We are predispositioned as humans to learn from stories. If you look at the Bible, what is it a book of?
Stories.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you a story. Mike Brassberger, one of our clients years and years and years ago, since retired, but he he's on a job doing, let's just say, I don't remember specifically what, but let's say he's doing a mechanical room upgrade. He gets a phone call one night in his hotel room at 10 p.m. Hey, this is your contracting officer. Okay, why are you calling me at 10 p.m.? Well, there's been a leak outside the building. Well, we're not doing any work outside the building. No, it's not your work. It's this other work. A pipe burst, and we know that you have a crew. Can you go out there and correct the leak? And he says, sure. Can I get a change order? And she says, how much? And he says, I don't know, $5,000. She says, sure, no problem. And she issues him a change order that night, but it says in the change order not to exceed $5,000. So he goes out there, gets his crew out of bed, stays up till 2 o'clock in the morning, fixes the leak, goes back to bed, walks into her office the next morning and says, we'd like to put an invoice in for the $5,000. You'll never believe what she said. She said, can you show me what your costs were? He goes, no, we got a change order for No, it says not to exceed 5,000. What were your costs? He said, I don't know, 4 hours of my team of 3 guys and $100 worth of parts. She says, okay, I'll give you a change order for $1,800. If you don't negotiate an actual modification to the contract prior to doing any work, 2 things can happen. One is they can actually say, well, you guys volunteered that. If you don't have a contract modification and you went behind those door frames and solved their problems, they can literally tell you you volunteered that. Even if somebody said, hey, you ought to fix that shit before you put the new frame in, that guy wasn't a contracting officer. Only a contracting officer can change your contract. He's been like everything for that job so far. Okay, and number 2, a request for equitable adjustment is just that, a request for equitable adjustment. The federal government can say no. The government can negotiate you down. The government, I
Just like
discuss
another
this in the 4
human
types of
ticket.
change orders in the workshop. I talk about negotiated changes, directed changes. I talk about cardinal changes, and something else that I'm not even thinking about right now.
But what you're also saying there too, because I remember you saying something about you have 10 days after you open up that door frame, they have 10 days to give us an answer on what they want us to proceed.
No,
like actions
you
to
have
proceed with
10
that.
days to notify the government of a differing site condition.
Okay. And then I guess like with that, because that's pretty much what we're running into every time we open up a door frame, is that us shutting down that door opening, making sure that that's not like a.
No, that's
I know
you.
actually
That
they're
what
all
that literally looks like is, hey guys, you got a fucking problem here. What do you want
right,
us to do about it?
right.
Okay.
But I guess with us
Well,
doing
this
like
is a secure
regular,
area. Well, okay.
right.
What? How do you want to solve that problem? Because anything that's a differing site condition, I can't proceed on until I've got specific direction on how to proceed.
Right.
So Sean, given that, so I've been trying to, now all these guys have done your workshop. I've been trying to direct to operate this job a little differently than our other ones. And it's been a struggle. But that other ones meaning negotiated work. But we've done, say, half of the doors in this solicitation or in this contract. Is there a way that we can stop? Would it be appropriate if we stop the work to say we need to modify the contract and try to capture the issues that we have already brought up to them in that modification?
First of all, I wouldn't stop the job because uh, you have a responsibility. So let me tell you what the responsibility is. If some area of the work has to be stopped because of differing site condition, there's nothing prohibiting you from working somewhere else in the building and proceeding there. Okay? So it's not a stop work on the whole job, it's a stop work on the area that you discovered there's a differing site condition. Okay? Now, technically, you are entitled to the cost associated with walking over to another door frame and working there. Nobody ever really tries to do that, particularly on a job with a whole bunch of places you could be working. But the reality is, if I use this as an example because most people understand what roofs are. If the job says decking is not a part of this contract, okay, and then you go up there and tear the roof off and you find multiple squares of decking that obviously have to be replaced, okay, you are entitled to then stop the job, walk off it until they decide what they want to do. Now you do have to protect the area, but protect means put a tarp on it, protect further damage from occurring. There's nothing protecting further damage in an area. When they talk about, hey, this is a secure area, and when you pull a door off, you have to put a door back, okay, that responsibility goes out the door when there's a differing site condition. You're not responsible for hiring private security to put an armed guard at the door to watch it 24 hours a day until a new door is put in place. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's how that works.
Okay.
You can't just stop the job. But to answer your other part of that question, yes, you want to start getting on top of the paperwork and the dollars. And I hate to tell you this because the hardest part of my job is telling somebody something that they don't want to hear. And I know as a contractor my whole life that what I'm about to say you don't want to hear. But I'm telling you, that contracting officer is going to be in a huge advantage in the negotiation for the costs associated with the inefficiencies associated with doing this work because you're trying to get money after the fact.
Yeah. Yep. I already knew that. And I think it's really good that Justin's hearing this. But in Justin's defense, he's new project manager.
Oh, that's okay.
still
I mean,
learning.
hey, listen, you know, you got 30 years of shit that's just been vomited out of my mouth onto guys that I know have never heard this stuff before, you know?
So while I have you on the phone, I've been trying to explain to Justin about the things that can go into that estimate for a modification. Where he is typically used to working with clients where it's, oh, I did something and it was 3.5 hours, and here's a
So
charge for 3.5 hours.
sure, I'll give a quick 3 minute, 5 minute discussion on that. So typically, Justin, when there's a change order, okay, hey, we want to add another door frame, okay, what would a typical construction contractor provide for costs? There's basically two things. What are they?
As a time and material.
Time and material. Okay. But what happened was, I I always say 50 years ago because when I learned this, it was 50 years ago, but now it's 75 years ago. 75 years ago, there was a guy who ran a sewing shop and he got a federal contract to make uniforms. His name was Ickley. And he got a stop work order from the federal government and said, hey, stop making uniforms. Okay, well, I've got 30 seamstresses in here running machines all day long. You want me to stop? We'll stop. Okay, he stops. 30 days later, they go, okay, go again. And he goes, well, wait a minute, I have all these costs. No, you don't. We stopped you, and now we're starting you. No, I had all these people. They were on payroll. You told me you were going to start again, and so I kept them. But I have costs. And they went, no, you don't. So he turned around and he sued the federal government. And the basis of his lawsuit was that I had to stay in business in order to be able to continue the contract. And just because you guys stopped doesn't mean that I didn't continue to accrue those costs. And he won. But there were two parts to it. One was, actually, let's stop right there on the iClay and then let's move to this other thing. If you guys, are you familiar with critical path method scheduling?
No.
Okay. So when I talk about scheduling, I like to talk about a house because most people understand the major components of building a house, and that is clearing and grubbing, concrete, framing, putting the side, whatever you're putting siding on, you know, eventually building a roof and putting all the roofing materials on and then you come in, you do the air conditioning. And so you got all these major components of building a house, putting in the windows, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you're getting ready to start the concrete pad on Monday, and it's going to take 2 weeks to do the concrete pad, but they come out there on Sunday or the Friday before and they say, hey, wait a minute, we know it's going to be 1,000 square foot house, but we want it to be a 1,500 square foot house. Okay? That's going to take another week, 3 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because now we got to redo the framing for the concrete and all that kind. There's impact. There's going to have to be rough plumbing that's going to have to be installed. It's going to impact and take more time, not just material, right? Now let me ask you this: the framer was scheduled to come out 2 weeks from Monday, right?
Mm-hmm. The concrete was supposed to be done in 2 weeks.
So when is the framer now going to come out?
Week after that.
A week after that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the finish date was supposed to be 6 weeks out. Now, when's the finish date?
It's going to be 7. You just added a week of work to it.
That's right. What does that cost you as a business?
Yeah.
Tell me what it costs as a business that your whole crew is going to be stuck on this job for an extra week as opposed to moving on to the next job.
Right. That costs you the time that they're there, the tools, the gas.
Well, tell
overhead,
me how that's included in time and material.
It would be in the time though, right? I mean, you can't.
No. When you say time and material, what you really meant was labor.
Right.
Okay. Tell me how labor and material includes that extra week being on the job site. The federal government in this case has impacted your company in a way that's going to make the company suffer. And that's not part of labor and material.
Right.
It's not even part of overhead. I mean, it's a little part, but what we call this, there's a technical term for this. It's called extended overhead. Extended overhead. If you guys don't understand the concept of extended overhead, you're fucking losing a shit ton of money, particularly on this job.
Well, we are.
Yeah.
So, how?
Let me ask you this: is this job tying up your bonding?
Yes.
Well, motherfucker, how are you getting compensated for that? That's not labor and material.
Yeah.
Excuse my language. Excuse my language, guys. I've been in this business a long time.
Well, I mean, as you're talking about it, I'm sitting there thinking about how even the delay, we had so many delays on just getting approvals on submittals.
Okay, the reason I talked about critical path method scheduling is because it's easy to show in a schedule what the actual impact of these delays are.
Okay.
And I would be going at the government for all of that. And I'll tell you this also, that if your daily reports aren't showing that we were delayed here, we were delayed here, we were delayed here, and then Eric came over and said this, and that caused this delay, and so we had to go work over here, and then we had to work over here. If that's not in the daily reports every single day,
they got to say the word delay.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah, because it's part of the official record so that somebody later, when you go hit them for a $100,000 change order, can go back and say, holy crap, these guys are really suffering. Because you might be in a situation one day, you're not writing it for you, you're not writing it for the contracting officer. What you're writing it for is the judge someday that's going to be reading that and go, Jesus Christ, they were telling you every single day.
Makes sense.
Yep.
If you go back and you read all my daily reports over the years and all the letters I ever wrote to the government, if you read them, you will notice that I wasn't writing it to him. It was addressed to him, but I was writing everything for the judge that was going to be reading it 4 years from now.
Well, I got a question for you. With the daily logs, when we do those, should we be obviously sharing that with the VA to let them know, like, hey, like, this is what my daily log intake was with the delay on this opening?
Not only would I be providing that to the look, in the reality is, yes, I would want to be giving them to the contracting officer, but really that happens with the contracting officer's representative. Because the moment that he reads those daily reports, he's going to be going, whoa, we didn't delay you, okay? And that's when the argument starts. And that's when you really need to have a conversation with me again. Because he's going to realize you're setting him up, okay? And that's...
Well, I say that just because, like, if we don't give it to him, and that we come back with these change orders that are like, well,
That's
you know,
right. That's right. No, you.
Yeah.
Hey, I thought you guys were volunteering this.
Right.
Okay. Now, not only do I turn daily reports in every single day, once a week I write a letter to the contracting officer. Hey, this is the status of the contract, and these are the delays that we are. It's a hardship. Cry, 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 because we're just a dumb contractor trying to do what you told us to do.
What's a method that you've seen people figure out the extended overhead?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's why I said it's the second part to the ICLAY formula. So if you Google ICLAY formula, you can read everything you want to know about it, and you can even misspell it, and it'll correct it for you. ICLAY is something like EICHLEY or something like that. But the ICLAY formula proposed an interesting question. And that question was, hey, if I've got 10 jobs that are $100,000 a piece, okay, that's $1 million worth of work. If I'm running 10% overhead on all my jobs, that's $100,000 of overhead that I should be entitled to receive over those 10 jobs. Do we agree so far?
Can you say it one more time?
Sure, no problem. I have 10 jobs, they're $100,000 a piece, that's $1 million worth of work. If I'm expecting that I have 10% overhead, over the course of those 10 jobs, I should be receiving $100,000 for my overhead. Yes or no?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Now all of a sudden, and let's just say for the argument that all those jobs would be done in a month. They wouldn't, but let's just say a month. So I should be entitled to $100,000 over, well, let's just say multiple months, because what I'm going to suggest is the government comes in and delays you 1 month. Oh, it's actually better math if we just say those 10 jobs will take 10 months to do. Okay? So over 10 months, I should get $100,000, but one of the jobs was delayed a month by the government. You still have your overhead every single day. In that month that you didn't get the 10% or the money that would add up to the 10% over that job, okay? How did you cover your overhead? You didn't go out of business. Okay. How did you? I'm asking you a question. How did you cover your overhead if you didn't get any money off that job?
You paid for it with other jobs.
You paid for it with other jobs. That's exactly right. And you should have been entitled to pay for it with this job.
Yep.
So if you go look at the ICLAY formula, it uses that concept, and you can actually come out with, so it turns out in extended overhead, you can ask the government one of two ways. You can't use both, but you use one or the other. One method is a daily rate. It costs us $300 a day to run this job, and you extended it 20 days, so I'm entitled to 20 times 300.
Okay.
The other methodology is expressed as a percent. Extended overhead is 5% of our costs on the job, on a change order. Okay? I always pick the number that's bigger.
Okay.
And if you look at our request for equitable adjustment form, it's got both options there. It's on the member website under change orders or request for equitable adjustment or whatever. I don't know what heading it's under, but it's in there.
Okay.
And so, for heaven's sake, don't use their form, because Justin over here, Superman, is saying, hey, they gave us this request. They told us to turn in a request for equitable adjustment. I have no idea what that means. Fucking A. I do. Use our form.
Gotcha.
Oh, by the way, the form that we provide for proposed change orders or requests for equitable adjustment, it's the same form. So, but the words have different meanings. request for equitable adjustment is, hey, we already did this and we're requesting for an equitable adjustment for what we did. A proposed change order is, hey, government, it looks like there's a change order situation here. Ask us for a proposal and we'll provide one. That's a proposed.
I guess that's what I'm asking there too with those change orders. Like, say we run into that problem with something going wrong with the opening that is on the VA end.
That's right. You turn in a proposed change order. You just change the heading.
Right, but then we stop the work on that until we get an approval on it, then go on to the next one. Say I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
You got it. And if somebody says, hey, you have a responsibility to continue, no, I don't, because we don't have a change order. But don't fall for their bullshit when they go not to exceed $2,000. Okay?
Right.
Yeah.
You want a modification in place.
Because my only hiccup, it's not even a hiccup. I guess what I'm saying is when we run into that problem, we open it, and then there's something that we have to do to it, then it is dropping the barricade that we have there or leaving the barricade up because, like, we have to make sure that there is.
That's right. You have costs associated with the change.
Right.
It's all not your fault. It's the government's fault that.
No, I get that. I'm just trying to make it make sense. That's why I guess
I am a dumb contractor. What do you want me to do?
Right. So then, then the thing is, obviously, leave that barrier up because obviously that door is no longer working, and then we'll just have barriers lined up everywhere. So then we would have to add costs for everything that we've just bought to make it because we're waiting on a change order.
Yes.
Okay.
Boy, now you guys are getting into the thick of it, and you're at a deeper level of understanding, which is fantastic. And this is when the shit starts flying, and this is when I get excited.
Yeah, it's the uncomfortable stuff where, like, I'm going to have to learn to be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was there too one day, and now I just laugh, and here we go.
Right. But they know that. Like, they know.
Oh, they're experts at it.
That's the process, right?
They are experts at it.
Right, and it's just us, like me having the balls to hold my ground.
That's right.
I think his struggle is like, he's got 5 jobs. This one job he's doing with the federal government. The other 4 are with 2 or 3 of our regular clients that we do negotiated work with, and you piss off a project manager over there, and that could look bad on you for the next job, and yada yada yada.
That's right, and that doesn't exist in the federal government. Which is, look, if you guys haven't heard me say this before, I'll say it again. I'm not a relationship guy. If you spend any amount of time with me, you'll never hear me say, "How are your kids doing? How was your vacation?" I'm not a relationship guy. I like being right. That's what's important to me. I've pissed a lot of people off in the federal government, but I was right. Okay, even to the extent of going and suing the federal government. Okay, because we were right, and we'll let a judge make that decision. So, yes, it's uncomfortable to take these positions, but I've been there before. I'll hold your hand every step of the way, and you guys can do this. You don't have to worry about relationships. All the federal contracts I ever got in my career were based on merit, not relationships. And I promise you, there's nobody over there saying, Justin's such a good guy, let's do this for him, or let's do, they've got processes, they have responsibilities, and it's even worse for the contracting officer because, their penalties are, federal crimes when they screw something up. They can be investigated by the Department of Justice at the flip of the switch. And so oftentimes, if I've got a serious enough problem, I call the contracting officer and say, hey, listen, you guys may have a problem here, and here's why you might want to know this, because, in some ways I want them to understand I can look out for them in certain cases, okay, in certain situations. And if I were you, this is what I would want to know. And then I lay out the actual federal acquisition regulations. In the workshop, we talk about that GAO decision where we got the other guy's bid thrown out. I don't know if you remember that, but we were concerned that the contracting officer might just tell us to screw off, and so we went we what's the word anyway, what we did was we provided that contracting officer the evidence of the GAO decision. Hey, you don't have to make this decision. It's already been made for you. And this is why you should change our bid. And the contracting officer just did it and threw the other guy out.
Yeah, that, I was just going to say to you, Justin, like, yeah, you hear how they talk about that other contractor serving them, but then they still hire them for jobs when they're low.
Right.
Like, it doesn't
matter.
Like, Sean, that last time I talked to you about that bid where that guy definitely missed something in his number.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, they were talking very poorly of that contractor prior to that bid, and they still are going to award it to him. However, I just found out the other day that it still hasn't been awarded, and I heard something about that contractor was talking about there was some stuff that was ambiguous, and I don't know if they were getting into a spot where they're pricing an estimate for what he's saying is missed before they award it. The CO got nervous that I heard some information. I don't know what that means, but he said to me that, well, those CORs shouldn't have been talking around you. And the CORs, when I did another job walk, were talking about this job the one I sent you the bids. They were talking about how that shitty contractor that we always end up hiring missed something, and they're going to play a game, and we're not going to stand for it. And that hasn't been awarded yet. And the COR was telling me I should call the CO and tell them that I want a breakdown of their bid, who supplied them numbers, because if they're supplying them different numbers than me, then I can contest it. But long story short is that job hasn't been awarded yet. I don't know if there's something I should be doing to try to pursue that job more.
Not necessarily, but you used the word ambiguous, and it triggered in my head that we need to talk about ambiguities for just a second. So you have two types of ambiguities. You have a patent ambiguity and a latent ambiguity. A patent ambiguity means it's obvious on its face. Anybody would catch it. And an example of that is page 7 says paint the room red, page 8 says don't paint the room. That's obvious on its face that there's an ambiguity there. Patent ambiguity. A latent ambiguity would be, instead of showing you in the drawings, or let's say in the drawings they say paint the room red, but you go to the paint section to look up what kind of paint, and it says there is no painting in this contract. That's a patent ambiguity, because not everybody would think to look in the specifications for directions on, not painting the room. No paint associated with this contract. Somebody could miss that, but nobody would miss paint the room and don't paint the room, particularly if the room's 50,000 square feet or something, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
On a patent ambiguity, the contractor has a duty to inquire. Everybody has a duty to inquire on a patent ambiguity prior to turning in your bid. Now, when there is a patent ambiguity and you have a responsibility to inquire, what does that physically look like? What are you supposed to do? In the bidding process, if you have a question, what are you supposed to do?
Send an RFI.
Send in an RFI. And what is the government mandated to do when they get an RFI?
Respond to it.
That's right, but do they only respond to you, or do they respond to everybody?
No, everybody.
On federal contracts, what does that physically look like?
addendum to the solicitor.
An amendment.
Amendment, yeah.
Okay. Now, an amendment is part of the public record, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if everybody had a duty to inquire, certainly there would have been a response, which means there would have been an amendment. Now, the government wants ambiguities to be patent ambiguities. The reason they want them to be patent ambiguities is because if you had a responsibility to inquire and you didn't, who's responsible for the ambiguity?
You.
You. That's why they want them all to be patent ambiguities. Okay? Now,
yeah.
Contractors want it to be latent ambiguities, because if it's a latent ambiguity, there's some room there as to who's responsible.
That makes sense.
Okay, now, the greatest argument of all time for is it a patent ambiguity or is it a latent ambiguity? Well, the government says, well, obviously, because they don't say patent or latent. They say, well, that's an ambiguity. Expecting that you're going to go, yep, now what? Okay. Whenever the government says there's an ambiguity, your response should always be, oh, well, show me the amendment. Because they immediately lose if there's no amendment.
So the last part one more time. So so like in this scenario, if I'm hearing that there's a ambiguity, I could say,
oh, show me the amendment, and I'll agree with you. Because if I had a responsibility to inquire, everybody else had a responsibility. You did have more than one bidder on this job, right?
7. Yep.
I'm being sarcastic. I'm actually talking to the federal government. You did have more than one bidder on this contract, right? And if the answer is yep, 7. So 7 contractors had a duty to inquire, and not a single one of them did.
That's a very great point.
Yeah.
So should I send an email to the CEO that says something along the lines of, I understand that this job was not awarded potentially to ambiguity. Please send
the amendments associated with the ambiguities that the low bidder had a duty to inquire about. It doesn't matter if you don't know what that means. The contracting officer will know what that means.
What do you think would... He did say that he couldn't get into why it hadn't been awarded yet.
Well, and he can't. He's right in that statement.
What do you perceive that? Would they go to rebid this? Would the...
All the options are on the table. That's why it could be anything. Could be the contracting officer had a hangnail, or a kid that needed to go to the doctor, and we're delaying this even more. It could be anything.
Okay. All right, well, I appreciate the information. Justin and I got to jump. We got to get to a PM meeting.
Yeah, I understand. Hey, I'm just here to help whenever you guys... I'm here to answer the call whenever you guys call, bro.
I really appreciate it.
Are you happy with the education you've been getting and the results you've been getting?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Thank you, Sean. We'll be in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.